As we begin our discussion of general syntax of the Perl language, we're going to start by talking about whitespace. And in your O2 syntax folder in your exercise files, you just want to take this file here, this syntax.pl, and make a copy of it. And so I'm going to right-click on it and select copy, and right-click on the folder and push paste. I'm going to call it whitespace.pl. And so now I'm working with a copy of this. I'll close this one and I'll open whitespace.pl. And in that way, our syntax file remains untouched while we play around with the copy, which is always a good idea. In order to discuss whitespace, we want to turn on the features in the editor that will allow us to see whitespace and manipulate whitespace. And so I'm going to go into my preferences here in Eclipse, and you'll do this with whatever editor it is that you're using, assuming that it has features like this, and most of them do. And I'm going to take out the insert tabs for spaces. I'm going to turn on the show whitespace characters. This is under general, appearance, editors, text editors, like that. I'm going to press apply. And then I know in Eclipse, I need to do the same thing in the Perl editor down here. I need to take out that. Otherwise, it'll continue to insert spaces instead of tabs. I'll press apply and OK. And now we can see the whitespace characters. We have the little paragraph marker, which is for the new line. We have these little dots for spaces. And if I insert a tab here, you'll see that I get this double right angle bracket thing instead of a tab. So now we can talk about whitespace. Whitespace in Perl is new lines, space characters, and tabs. And whitespace is pretty much ignored in most circumstances. There's a couple of places where whitespace is actually required, and so we'll talk about that. Let's start the discussion by just removing a bunch of whitespace from this function here. And I'm going to actually just shorten this text down a little bit. And we'll get rid of this whitespace. And so now we have this subroutine here that's got only white spaces between the words sub and main, and that's actually required. It has to be some kind of white space in order for that keyword to be isolated, and so that the interpreter knows that that's a keyword and not part of the name of the function of the subroutine. And so I'll go ahead and I'll save and run this, and we can see that we get the word short text there. So this is actually still working, even though I've taken out all of that white space. So most of that white space is ignored. I can put in some white space here. I can use maybe a tab there. I can put white space here and here. I can put white space there and there and there. And all of this white space, and it can be new lines, it can be combinations of things. I can, it's a new line and a tab there. I could actually indent this a bunch if I wanted to. I can do all of these things, and this will still run. I'll save, file save, and run, and it's still working. So all of that white space is actually ignored. And in fact, even this required white space, I can put in a new line and a couple of tabs, and that'll still run. That's pretty much how Perl uses white space. In most places, you can eliminate it entirely. It's really just necessary where it's necessary to separate keywords and things that need to be separate. And other than that, white space can be whatever you want it to be for formatting purposes. Using my undo function here to bring this back to something like its original state. And this is the style that I happen to like. I think it's important when you're programming to use the white space, if you've got a language where white space is optional, to use the white space as a way of setting apart the things that are important, making it easy on the eye so that you can read the code when you come back to it at a later time. So I tend to use white space as a way of formatting the code so that I can read it later. And that, in my opinion, is the function of white space in a language like Perl, where white space is mostly ignored.